Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Today we are going to talk in terms of a post-mortem on the Travis Rudolph case, so join me down at the beach. When a pathologist does a post-mortem on a human body, the goal is to find out what killed that human body. And in that regard, you have to cut into that human body and figure out all of the things that went wrong that led up to the patient's death. Well, when you do a post-mortem of a trial, you have to start with the original charging decision. And the original charging decision here is primarily the cause of death for this particular trial. Now, in this particular case, I have had a defense bias because I happen to know a little bit about self-defense law, and I happen to know a little bit about Florida law, even though I'm not a Florida lawyer and I don't claim to be. But the bottom line is I understand what went into the process of getting a charging decision here. And it would appear to me that this was a very rushed investigation and it was not a very thorough investigation. So today, in terms of this post-mortem, we are only going to look at two witnesses. But I believe that these two witnesses, as much as anyone else, cost the state this trial. The first witness we're going to look at is the detective who did the original investigation and the defensive way that she goes about explaining herself and frankly just the lack of credibility in her testimony. And I think you will see that. The second person we're going to look at is going to be somebody who testified on day 3. His testimony is interesting for a couple of reasons. One reason I think it's interesting is because he does this tactic of repeating the question. You'll ask a question, where were you at 2 o'clock? And he'll say, where was I at 2 o'clock? When people do that, generally, they do that to give themselves time to think about the answer. Now, there's nothing wrong with thinking about the answer, but repeatedly going back and saying the question over again, that's a tell. And the tell is that they're not confident about testifying and they are on guard to make sure that they don't slip up not only and say something wrong, but maybe say something that winds up getting them facing charges. And I think you'll see that in these videos and the video segments that I'm going to show you. So with that said, let's dive right into the detective and the way that I think she really lost credibility at the very beginning.
Are you aware that Dominique Jones spoke to Mrs. Rudolph just before this homicide?
No, ma'am. Or no, sir.
You're not aware of that?
Before?
Yes, ma'am.
No.
You're not aware that
Oh,
Dominique Jones...
I'm sorry. Yes, I am.
Okay.
Pardon me.
How do you know that?
The phone records.
You're the lead detective. You should have the best command of the facts of anybody in this case. You should know more about the facts than the prosecuting attorney. You're the expert on this investigation. And the defense attorney has to tell you how you became aware that there was a text from Dominique over to Travis's mom. That's, again, when you're up on the stand, not only are you testifying and the words mean things, but the looks that you give and the inability to focus on the question damage your credibility. When she is asked this question, she answers initially no. She does that twice, and then, oh yeah, that's right, we had text messages. if I'm on the jury, I'm thinking, does this gal really have a command of what happened here?
And you're talking phone records only from Dominique Jones, the one you know erased phone messages, right? Same Dominique Jones, right?
The previously discussed single text message, yes, sir.
You don't know that. You're not a phone expert. You can't tell this jury she erased other stuff, can you?
I am not an expert. You're correct.
You have no clue what she erased, do you? Other than the one she confessed to when you had her brother's phone, right?
I suppose, yes, sir.
If you read her body language and you read her expressions on her face, you notice how she tries to correct him about, well, it was only one text message. And it reminds me of that wonderful song about, well, the gal who supposedly is an angel all winter who brings the homeless blankets and dinner. And then the gal at the end of the song says something to the effect of, well, it was only one tooth that I blacked out. And this is like, it's only one fact that I missed here. It's only one text message, no big deal. And then he points out, look, you're not an expert. You didn't go over the phone. You don't know how many text messages she erased. Again, if you're trying to come across as credible and honest, then you don't go extend yourself over your skis to begin with. And then the next thing that you don't do is you don't immediately relent and say, oh yeah, well, you're right, I'm not an expert. What she should have done is she should have said, I am not an expert. However, I understand from the people that we have that are expert, there's only one message. Or there was only one message that I knew about. Something to that effect. But instead of repeating the thing that would have helped her case, she comes across as angry and defensive. And that's not a good look for a detective.
Well, you said yesterday you had no information other than what these young men told you. That's not really true, is it, ma'am?
It's true, sir.
So despite what Linda Rudolph told you, that's not contrary to what you knew?
Making a simple statement such as that is not information which would lead me to have probable cause or cause at all to believe that there's further evidence that needed to be searched.
You ignored what Miss Rudolph told you, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Your probable cause means you just have to write a report that someone probably did something, right? Based on your report that you write.
I
what
wouldn't
it
say
is?
that's what probable cause is, sir. No.
You disagree that probable cause is not a report that you write under oath, and you include whatever you think is important, and that's what you base your arrest on, what you believe is probable cause, your opinion.
Well, the first thing you said, sir, was that it's a report of something that somebody probably did. I disagree with that. It's based on evidence.
Doesn't probable cause mean probably, possibly, probably, or you disagree? It means definitely.
I didn't say it means definitely, but I wouldn't say it's probably. It's based off of evidence.
These kinds of answers and this particular cross-examination of this witness is the reason the state lost this case. She is doing a terrible job. And when she comes across, as she comes across, she's just trying to defend her work, but it comes across as, well, I didn't really care about anything else. I had the information that I was looking at, and, one little statement from somebody else wouldn't have mattered. Well, that's for the jury to decide, and I think they decided contrary to what this detective believed. When you have a term of art like probable cause, the root word in probable cause is probable. In other words, it can't just be possible that, it could be possible that any one of us pulled the trigger on that gun, but it's not probable. Probable means very likely or likely. And in this particular instance, when she denies that probable cause means probably, she just looks like she doesn't know what she's doing. For a detective to say probable cause doesn't start with probably is insane. And I can't imagine why in the world she did it, other than that she's going to try not to give this cross-examiner anything. And that's where she's really going off the beaten path, and she's getting herself into trouble. When you are a witness in a trial and you are being cross-examined, the more you fight with the cross-examiner, the more defensive you look. And in addition, the more culpable you look when you're talking about doing a bad investigation. If you feel you have to defend yourself by saying that probable cause doesn't start with probably, then you might want to rethink your line of endeavor in terms of your life's work. The key to surviving cross-examination in a situation like this is to make the questioner ask short questions that can be easily answered, yes or no, or I don't know, and not to fight with him. When he asked the probable cause question, what she could have done is she could have said, I define probable cause as a conclusion based on evidence that somebody broke the law, or whatever it is that she believes probable cause to be. But what she should not have done was do this ridiculous thing saying, well, probably it doesn't figure into it, when it very clearly does. Clear, the lead detective here did a pretty bad job of testifying on behalf of the state, but she's not alone in that fact. The fact is that most of the state's witnesses were unreliable just based on their demeanor and the things that they said. And in this next vignette, the defense attorney is trying to get this gentleman to admit that he carried a gun and that he displayed a gun. I don't think he's going to get the latter, but I do think he would finally get the former. And one of the things that he's asking about is, why didn't you tell anybody you had this gun when you were at the hospital? And watch his reaction here.
One question, you were hoping nobody would find your gun, right? The police wouldn't find your gun. That was what you wanted.
No, sir, that's not what I wanted.
Then why didn't you tell them when they first came to you or at the hospital? Why didn't you say I had a gun? You guys better find it. Why didn't you tell them that?
My mind was all over the place. I got shot multiple times.
You got released the very next day, right?
That's because I was given the option to either recover at the hospital or recover at home. So I chose to recover at home just because I felt more comfortable doing that.
All right. So you disagree that you didn't want anyone to find your gun in law enforcement. You disagree with that statement.
No, or I would disagree with that statement, sir.
I went back and watched that clip numerous times, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why he said that. If he had wanted his gun to be found, he could have told somebody. If he didn't want his gun to be found, he wouldn't have told someone. When someone asks you, well, it's clear you didn't want your gun to be found, and you say, no, that's not what I did. I wanted that, but then I didn't tell anybody. When you get a fact-based and pointed question about what you did or did not do, you can't just meander through it saying, oh, I was hurt, and I didn't know the gun was loaded, and the check didn't clear, and I had a bunion on my foot, and you can't mumble through the issue. You can either say, look, I didn't want the gun found, or it wouldn't have bothered me if they'd found the gun. They couldn't have traced it to me. Whatever it is that he really wanted to say here, he probably should have, because he did himself no favors with that answer. Now, watch his behavior while the lawyer is gathering data to impeach him here. Watch how he looks at the lawyer, and watch this sly smile sort of creep across his face for just an instant. I think it is very telling here, and the jury sees this. It's not a picture of the guy, A, who's anxious to testify and wants to get this done with, or B, is particularly interested in telling the truth. He's just trying to get off of that stand as quickly as he can, and he can't figure out how to do it. If I was the state, I would have been absolutely mortified presenting these witnesses as fact witnesses here. I realize they were shot, but the fact is they went there with guns, and it makes no sense to favor them and disfavor Travis. This is where, again, the state lost the case. You have this gentleman who very clearly went there to do violence, and he's being asked now about the gun that he owned, supposedly, and the fact that he purchased it for $1 from the same fellow, one of the fellows that was also involved in this attack. And he purchased it for $1. And that's pretty amazing. He apparently went with Kishan, the person who bought the gun. You'll see in a moment. But then he starts fogging. And this is a tactic I think that kids learn in grade school about you don't answer the question about whether you took your cookie out of the cookie jar. You say, well, the cookie jar was way up on a high shelf. That's not an answer. That's like a defensive mitigation, I guess. The bottom line is you can't get away with not answering the question. And you can see the defense attorney here get very, very irritated with him when he won't answer the question. And then he draws an objection because he's being argumentative. Well, the reason he's being argumentative is because the witness is playing stupid here. And I think that's pretty obvious.
The day you decided to go over Mr. Rudolph's home, you didn't have an invitation from the Rudolph family to come, did you?
No, sir.
You didn't call Mr. Travis Rudolph and say, hey, I'm coming over to talk to you, did you?
No, sir.
You didn't ask, did you have Mr. Rudolph's phone number?
No, sir.
You didn't ask Dominique Jones for his phone number so you can try to talk about this or meet maybe at a McDonald's where there's won't be any problems, right?
Right. No, sir, I didn't.
Why? Why didn't you do that? If it was so important to do what y'all had to do, why didn't you try to call him and say, hey, let's meet in a mutual place where there's cameras, there's witnesses? Why didn't you do that?
I just made a mistake, quite honestly.
You think?
I'm young. I was young and I'm still young. I don't know. I mean, sometimes you make poor choices. That was definitely just a poor choice that I made.
Well, would you call a hit like you were trying to do a poor choice?
I'm sorry,
Call a hit on another human being a poor choice?
Can you define what a hit is? Like
I don't know what that is.
when you punch someone?
When you go to kill somebody.
I'm sorry, what's your
You
question?
go to kill somebody. You ask me what it means. I'm telling you what it means.
Right.
No?
When you go to kill somebody, what's the question?
You went there to kill Mr. Rudolph, didn't you?
No, sir. I never intended to kill Travis or showed any intent that I was going to kill him.
Pointing a gun at somebody. That's not an intent to kill somebody?
Never pointed my gun at Travis.
What's taking your shirt off at midnight before he even comes out or his brother comes out of the house? That shows an intent to beat someone or shoot somebody, doesn't it, sir?
Intent to fight, I wouldn't say so, but actually, honestly, yes, I would say so. Yes, having your shirt off would probably show an intent to incite a fight or
what?
Or have a physical altercation of sorts.
Or it could lead to somebody getting severely beaten up or killed, right?
I don't necessarily think having your shirt on or off would particularly affect that situation.
Why'd you tell the jury earlier that it's summertime? You're a young guy, it's summertime. That's why I took my shirt off. Why'd you tell them that earlier?
Objection to mischaracterizing. Yeah, I honestly, I don't recall that testimony.
In my notes, Judge, I do.
All right. Well, based on that representation, then go ahead.
Can I
Ask
ask
the question.
Ask another question? Before?
Sure. Go ahead.
Did you tell the jury that it was something to the effect, I took my shirt off because it's summertime, I'm a young guy?
That was more or less my justification of, I said I take my shirt off often, so I was justifying why I would take my shirt off.
Now, the state gave all of the victims a free pass on the firearms charges. Didn't charge them for any of that. And I think when you combine that with the way these folks are answering the questions and the other clips that I've put up on my channel regarding this particular trial, you can see where the state just had nothing with which to convict him, and pretty much all of the evidence, I mean, there was certainly some evidence that could have convicted him, the fact that he fired the 39 shots, but again, they did not tailor or focus their case in the way that they should have. Now, maybe that's because they're young and inexperienced prosecutors, or maybe it's because they just had a really rotten case. I'm not sure which. But I can tell you this much. No lawyer enjoys putting up a witness that they know is going to be disemboweled on cross-examination. Both the detective and this witness were pretty much beaten up on cross-examination. And again, that's not a good look. To that mixture, the fact that the principal defendant here, Travis Rudolph, got up on the stand and testified cogently and honestly and unflappably about what happened, and the fact that his mom came to trial and testified about the security system, and the fact that this gal had essentially put out a hit on her. And then when you mix in the closing argument that was done by the defense here, it simply was the final blow in an already pretty much moribund case. So if you're looking for reasons why the state lost, one, they shouldn't have charged the case in the first place. Two, their witnesses all had something to hide and were all basically getting a free pass on their own criminal acts in order to lay the blame off on Travis Rudolph. That never sits well with a jury. And then three, the prosecutor did a terrible closing argument and the defense was masterful in their closing argument. So that's what I have for you today. It's just a real quick PM on this particular case. Hopefully you found it useful, helpful, interesting. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I haven't been able to get to questions in a couple of days because I've been doing a lot of other things, but I would be happy to get to them if you would leave the questions. I will try and get you answers. Thanks again for watching. I pulled up behind a car today and it had a sign on the back that made me happy. It said, "Be kind." Please be kind to others today if you get the chance. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you down here at the beach next time. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.